Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are opening a file that sits right at the intersection of a bureaucratic nightmare and, well, a psychological horror movie.
It really does.
It's a story about a hospital, a telegram, and a mistake so colossal that it forced the legal system to rewrite the rules on how we value human suffering. We are looking at the landmark case of Johnson v. State.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and frankly a devastating case. It's one of those rare moments in legal history where the facts are so visceral that they literally force the court's hand. I mean, it challenges everything the law used to believe about the separation between our bodies and our minds.
And that's the core tension we're exploring with you today, right? The difficulty of getting the law to recognize that you can be destroyed without ever being touched. We're talking about direct claims for negligent infliction of emotional distress, which is a mouthful, so let's just call it NIED for this deep dive, specifically when it comes to misinformation.
That is the target. And to really understand the gravity of Johnson v. State, we have to go on a bit of a journey. We need to start in the old world of tort law, the era where emotional harm was basically invisible to the court, and then see how this one case smashed through those barriers.
So if we had to boil this down to a mission statement for this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are we trying to figure out?
Our mission is to analyze how the New York Court of Appeals used a concept called the guarantee of genuineness to allow recovery for emotional harm caused by a hospital's negligence.
I love that phrase, guarantee of genuineness. It sounds like something you'd see on a certificate of authenticity.
Right.
But before we get to the solution, let's talk about the problem. Why have courts historically been so stingy when it comes to emotional distress? I mean, if you run me over with a car, the law says pay him. If you traumatize me so badly I can't sleep for a month, the law historically said, tough luck. Why the double standard?
It really comes down to a deep-seated cynicism in the legal system. For a long time, the prevailing wisdom backed by heavyweights like the legal scholar Prosser was that the courts simply couldn't handle mere negligence claims for emotional trauma.
When you say mere negligence, it sounds so dismissive, like, oops, my bad.
That's exactly how the courts viewed it. If the harm wasn't intentional, if it was just a mistake, they felt that emotional fright was too evanescent. That's the word they use. It means fleeting, vaporous.
So they thought people were just being dramatic.
Worse, they thought they were lying. The courts were terrified of what they called counterfeit claims. The logic was that emotional pain is invisible, it's easy to fake. If we let one person sue because they got scared, suddenly we open the floodgates. Every fender bender becomes a $1 million trauma case.
The famous floodgates of litigation argument.
Exactly. So, to keep the floodgates closed, they built a wall. The general rule was that courts usually deny recovery for mere negligence, causing only emotional trauma. You needed a contemporaneous or consequential physical injury or impact. That was the old requirement.
So the broken bone was the receipt for the broken spirit.
That is a perfect way to put it. The physical injury provided an index of reliability. Without it, the courts just assumed you were faking it, or that the injury was trivial.
Which brings us to 1970. Let's analyze Johnson v. State. First, what are the legally dispositive facts?
So you have the claimant's mother, Emma Johnson, who was a patient at the Hudson River State Hospital. She had been there since 1960. Then, on August 6, 1970, another patient at the same hospital, who coincidentally was also named Emma Johnson, passed away.
Oh boy, I think I see where this is going.
It's exactly what you fear. The hospital staff committed gross carelessness. They pulled the record of the living Emma Johnson instead of the deceased one. They then sent a telegram to the claimant's aunt, Nellie, announcing the death, asking to notify relatives, make burial arrangements, and requesting consent to study all deaths for scientific reasons.
Wait, they were asking to do an autopsy on a woman who was still alive?
Yes. So the claimant, Fleeter Thorpe, was notified. They hired an undertaker. The claimant incurred actual funeral expenses. But then, at the funeral home, the claimant and aunt noticed the body's appearance had changed. Upon a second visit, the claimant verified it was not her mother.
That cognitive dissonance must have been agonizing.
It was. She became very, very hysterical and had to be helped out. The hospital later admitted their error. As a result of the shock, the claimant was out of work for 11 days. Psychiatrists confirmed anxiety neurosis with objective physical symptoms like rapid speech, perspiration, nightmares, and terrifying dreams of death.
Unbelievable. And what was the core legal issue?
Can the daughter of a hospital patient recover for emotional harm sustained solely due to negligent misinformation that her mother had died, specifically when there was no physical impact to the daughter?
What rule of law did the court apply? Please state the full black-letter rule and break it down into its testable elements.
The rule derived from the holding is that a hospital owes a specific duty to the next of kin to transmit death notices accurately. Breach of this duty allows recovery for emotional harm if there is a guarantee of genuineness. This rule has 4 elements. First, duty, meaning a specific relationship creating an obligation to advise next of kin. Second, breach, which is the negligent transmission of false information. Third, causation, specifically proximate cause within the orbit of danger. And fourth, damages, which must be proven harmful consequences supported by objective manifestations or a guarantee of genuineness.
Thank you. Now for the court's elemental analysis. Let's walk through this step by step. How did the court apply the first element, duty?
The sub-issue here is whether the hospital owed an obligation directly to the daughter who wasn't the patient. The sub-rule is that a specific relationship creates an obligation to advise. Applying the facts, the court found that when the hospital took on the care of the mother, they assumed the duty to advise the proper next of kin of her death. Therefore, the court concluded that the first element, duty, was established.
Understood. Now what about the second element, breach?
The sub-issue is whether the hospital failed in its duty. The sub-rule requires the negligent transmission of false information. Applying the facts, the hospital admitted to gross carelessness by pulling the wrong patient record and sending the false telegram. Because of this clear failure, the court concluded that the breach element was easily met.
Right. And what about the third element, causation?
The sub-issue here is proximate cause. Was the emotional harm foreseeable? The court applied the sub-rule from Paulsgraf v. Long Island Railroad, looking at whether the injury was within the orbit of danger. Applying this, the court reasoned that the risk of serious psychological impact from a false death message was highly foreseeable. If you send a false telegram like that, severe trauma to the family is the direct result. Therefore, the court concluded the injury was within the orbit of the duty, satisfying the causation element.
That makes perfect sense. Now what about the fourth element, damages and the guarantee of genuineness?
This was the biggest hurdle. The sub-issue is whether emotional damages can be awarded without physical impact. The sub-rule requires special circumstances that provide a guarantee of genuineness.
How did they apply that to Fleet or Thorpe?
The court likened her situation to 2 existing exceptions: negligent telegraph messages announcing death and the negligent mishandling of a corpse. These scenarios have an especial likelihood of genuine and serious mental distress. You don't fake the horror of a mishandled body. The court also made a powerful logic argument.
About the funeral expenses, right?
Exactly. They said it was illogical to allow recovery for the pecuniary loss, the funeral expenses of $1,600, but deny recovery for the emotional shock caused by the exact same tortious act. Plus, the claimant had objective manifestations like nightmares, inability to work, and confirmed anxiety neurosis. Because of these factors, the court concluded the damages element was met.
And after analyzing all the elements, what was the court's final conclusion?
The Court of Appeals reversed the appellate division. They concluded that the claimant is entitled to recover for emotional harm, and they reinstated her $7,500 award. They held this because the evidence showed causation, substantiality of harm, and crucially, a guarantee of genuineness.
It's a huge victory for common sense. But I want to test the limits of this. The court relied heavily on the death aspect, the corpse, the telegram. Can you give us a visceral hypothetical to illustrate this guarantee of genuineness outside of death notifications?
Definitely. Let's use the lab report hypothetical, which Prosser actually references in the source material.
Lay it on me.
Imagine a laboratory negligently informs a patient that his sperm count indicates sterility.
Oof, that is heavy. So they just tell a guy he can never have kids, completely by mistake.
Exactly. Now, there is no physical impact there. No one touched him. But like the death telegram, this is a specific misinformation scenario with a high likelihood of genuine mental distress.
Because who would fake the devastation of finding out they are sterile?
Precisely. The analysis holds that this creates an especial likelihood of real suffering. It serves as an exception to the general rule because the nature of the information itself provides the guarantee that the distress is genuine.
It really is about the gravity of the news. Okay, we've covered the history, the heartbreaking facts, and the legal breakthrough. Now, I want to synthesize this. For you listening, if you're trying to spot this issue on an exam, how do we diagnose a direct NIED claim based on Johnson v. State?
We can synthesize the Johnson rule into a 4-step diagnostic checklist. Number 1, identify the relationship. Is there a specific duty-bound relationship? Think hospital and next of kin or doctor and patient.
Check. What's next?
Number 2, check the act. Was there negligent misinformation regarding a sensitive subject? It has to be heavy stuff like death or serious medical status.
Step 3.
Number 3, Analyze the orbit. Is emotional shock the obvious, foreseeable result of the mistake? That is your pulse graph analysis. Was the trauma a direct hit?
And the final step.
Number 4, verify the genuineness. Look for a guarantee of genuineness akin to corpse mishandling or telegraph errors. Are there objective physical manifestations like nightmares or anxiety? Or are there pecuniary losses like funeral costs that corroborate the claim? You need something that proves the suffering is real.
Relationship, act, orbit, genuineness. That is a powerful framework. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. In Johnson, the telegram was a huge part of the case. It was a physical piece of evidence, a paper trail of the negligence. It looked official.
It did.
But consider this. If the hospital hadn't sent the telegram, if the daughter had simply walked into the hospital lobby, asked to see her mother, and a nurse had just verbally told her the wrong news, would the guarantee of genuineness still hold up without that formal paper trail?
That is the million-dollar question. Does the medium of the message matter, or is it just the message itself?
Something for you to mull over next time you get a text message that makes your heart skip a beat. That's it for this deep dive into Johnson v. State. Thanks for listening.